Hey, what is up, everyone? This is Jake Hofer with Exodus Trail Cameras. Today we have a brand new video version of our podcast, Trail Cam Radio, and we sit down with Steve Sherk at the Harrisburg show, and he's back by popular demand. We did a previous interview in 2019 and received a lot of great feedback, so we'll link to that previous interview so you can go watch that if you haven't done so already. Steve is a PA mountain buck hunter and gets on a lot of big deer, so it's always a pleasure to sit down with him and get his thoughts on various topics. This one's mainly about postseason scouting, so if you haven't got out yet, there's still time to put some of these things to application. So we hope you guys enjoy this interview. If there's someone you'd like us to sit down with or do a Whitetail Cribs visit with, please leave a comment below so we know. We plan out these trips throughout the year and we do our best to line them up, but if there's a way we can make it happen, we will. And we just want to say thanks for all the support, and let's get into the interview.
Lights, camera,
follow the trail.
ready to shoot.
If you know where a deer's bedding and you know where he's eating, that deer should be dead.
Camera!
If you're passive on a deer, what you're doing is you're teaching them.
I've got 30 bucks in the Michigan record book. Everyone but one has had at least one previous wound on his body. Some had as many as 4.
Trail Cam Radio from the guys at Exodus.
All right, we are live at the Airbnb in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania. Steve Sherk has stopped by this morning. Thanks for stopping by.
Thanks for having me.
Second offender.
Yeah. We drove up to your camp last, September, maybe August, I don't remember. And we recorded a podcast there and a lot of great feedback.
Great.
And I looked at the map and said, we're going to be in Pennsylvania. Steve Sherk's from Pennsylvania. Let's make it happen. Yeah. And we appreciate you stopping by. We were at the show, at the Great American Outdoor Show. We had multiple people come up at the show and say, or at the booth, and say they really enjoyed the podcast with you in particular. So looking forward to talking about some various things today. But how was your season?
Oh, it was a great season, and once again, thanks for having me. Just like always, though, it was a great season. Very fortunate for that, but just really anxious for this next one. Already a lot of great deer that we know made it, and I'm have to say, a nice day like today, even though I'm doing the podcast, I'd probably rather be out there getting ready for next season. But no, thanks a lot for having me.
One quick question. I know, I follow you on Instagram, and you're always you're in woods a lot.
Almost every day.
Do you log your miles, for the year? Do you
Not
pay
for the
attention?
year. I actually thought about doing that, but I mean, probably on an average day. Although it may be a lot to some people, probably only 4 or 5 a day. It's not like I'm doing 10 a day, but in big woods and mountains, 4 or 5 a day, it wears on you. Yeah. I might age a little bit sooner than some guys.
But still, you're doing 4 or 5 miles a day. Let's say 3 days a week or 4 days a week.
Probably at least 5.
You're over 500 miles for the year. Getting after it.
I usually go through about 10 pair of boots a year. Kid you not. I can't.
You gotta get yourself some new boots.
You tell me the brand. I've tried it, so I definitely put the miles on.
That's pretty wild.
And I'm just really fortunate that I get the time, being self-employed and just got a family that supports what I do. So the passion's there. So I'm going to be out there.
Very cool. So last year, and I guess I've already done the research, but you had a set of sheds above where we recorded. The deer was named Goliath.
Yep.
I saw the picture on your Facebook page of someone that commented and said, "Is this Goliath?" And I saw the thread of, unfortunately, yes, that was him. Is there any new Goliaths? And I know that's a once-in-a-lifetime deer in Pennsylvania, really anywhere. Has one taken the place of that, or has that void been filled already?
Yeah, that buck that I think you saw I found the shed from maybe a few weeks ago, and luckily that was Exodus camera that told me
nice.
That he dropped. But he's only 4 years old. That shed was 70 inches, and that was his smaller side. So he's already pushing 160 this year at 4 years old. So Goliath at 6, he was maxed in the 160s. So that buck there, hopefully, if all goes well, I'll have to come up with a different name, or what can't be Goliath Junior, but I really think he'll be a dream buck, and hopefully there'll be others, as I go on.
Yeah, and for people who didn't listen to the last podcast, I guess I'll kind of recap for you. You run about 80 cameras.
Yep.
In Pennsylvania. You have an outfitting DIY public land outfitting business.
Yep.
and obviously a whitetail fanatic.
I've been guiding for about 6 years now in Pennsylvania, and it's not just DIY. We do a lot of fully guided hunts. It's all on public land, and it's just if you're from PA, especially from those areas, PA is really growing some big deer now, which is benefiting my business. A lot of guys from northeastern part of the country used to go out Midwest, and now it's like, why go all the way over there when we can save half the time, half the trip, and half the money and go to PA. So, no, it's been going really well, and I really enjoy it. So I think it's only going to get better, hopefully.
I've had this thought multiple times. I'm from Illinois, and I'm like, gee, he's from Pennsylvania. He's got more big deer on camera than I do, and I'm in Illinois, like in a decent part of Illinois.
And a lot of that's just from being able to be out in the woods every day. And, I mean, PA is, in my opinion, really good, definitely overlooked, but it's not like behind every tree you're going to find a giant, or it's just polluted. But if you put your time in, you're going to run into some really big deer.
I believe that. I guess anything else you want to cover before we get into some trail camera topics? I mean, how was your client success for the last year? Do you have a lot of repeat people or annual clients?
Yep, every year I'm getting a lot of the same guys, which is really good too, because when you get the same guy, you already know how he likes to hunt or what he can do, and it's just so much easier. And even get some guys that you don't even have to really guide them. Just say, hey, remember where you went last year? And they go there, and they're having a great time. I would say for the most part, I'm taking new guys, but it's a good thing because, like I said, the guys keep coming back, and I'd love to get new people, but it may just change someday because you can only take on so many guys, and but we'll see what happens.
Yeah, that's a sign of a successful business, in my opinion.
No doubt.
Thank you.
No doubt.
So I guess let's get into some trail camera stuff. One thing that you discuss quite a bit, and by running so many cameras, is using test cameras, is what you call, and we just kind of say that in our terms of like soaking a camera for a year.
Yeah.
How do you go about finding a place that is, I guess, test camera worthy?
Sure.
In the big woods.
Well, you brought up that I'm running like 80-some cameras. So if you run 80-some cameras in the area that I'm hunting, you're not going to be able to keep up with it. So I would say like 20 or 30% are what I call test cameras, that new area or new spot, new location, I'll just put it up there usually around like early October, and I just leave it sit, and I probably won't even check it till after the season. And then it might not be so much to see what's in the area, but it's, are the deer coming through here in the daylight, or is it certain times of the year in that 2 to 3 month period? Excuse me. But I've had really good luck doing that, and then some of them are just like, oh wow, this area didn't work, but that's why it's called a test camera, and I really like doing it. I bet you this year, out of my test cameras, I think I've got, good solid 10 locations that really produced, and I'm super looking forward to that next year.
What's been some of the most interesting lessons you've learned from the past with those test cameras?
Well, the biggest lesson is that we have a bear problem. A lot of times I'll put those cameras up high. I've had bears even climb the tree, and honestly, say out of like 20 of those cameras, I'll go back and always at least 5 of them are probably smashed up around the ground. So the bears have been a big problem. It's public land. Occasionally I'll get someone messing with a camera, and it's a big disappointment because when you've left a camera for that long and it's been on your mind, you get up there and sometimes it's 2 miles back in, and oh geez, that was all a waste. But that's just part of it, and you're not. What I really like about doing that also is I'm not interfering with the area, so the deer really know that nothing's in there to harm them, and like I said, I think it's a really great way to just find new area and new spots. And because guys put cameras out and they're so anxious to, I got to check my camera next week. But honestly, when I say it's a test spot, it's a test spot, and I just leave it be and see what happens.
I think that's the biggest point there. A lot of the stuff that we're doing in the big woods is pretty similar. We have different verbiage or terminology, but having that data, what I call like unaltered, is like the deer movement there is not influenced by any human intrusion. Hopefully, hopefully there's no one walking in there.
Yep.
And the data points are just it's more accurate, it's more real. And as you said, like even though maybe that camera was dead, but you're still getting something from that because the spot is dead during a certain time of the year, or maybe the whole entire spot's.
Yep. I'll bring up something too that last time we talked about a lot, but what I find is certain areas are good for certain times of the year. One of the biggest things I see happening is when the leaves fall. What happens is like a lot of your bedding cover, once the leaves fall, the deer will shift, just because the leaves make great cover, and then once the leaves drop, the deer are going into different areas, just to find a better cover. And I noticed that a lot with my test cameras. Like I'll have it in a certain area, and then once the leaves drop, it'll shut right down. And that's just because the deer, shift their bedding areas. And then I get on my test cameras, as soon as the leaves drop, this area starts producing just because of the cover aspect of it.
Are those test locations? Would you say they're more in relation to bedding and cover, or more in relation to food? Like when you're picking those spots and scout, or is it a mixture of both?
All my test cameras are bedding related because I just can't count on food being there the next year. Mm-hmm. But obviously the bedding cover usually doesn't change. So yeah, almost all of them are in or right near bedding cover.
That's a great question. What are, I guess, when you do see that shift, and we're going to have a shift conversation as well for the rut, but where do you see them shifting to? Is it this thicker, more dense areas? I guess
you mean
break
like
that down.
for the bedding stuff?
Yeah.
Yeah. So what I usually find is later in the year when you're getting from that bedding shift, usually it's around Halloween, early November. The deer will start looking like going into older clear cuts. They don't like nasty thick. They'll go in nasty thick, but usually for different reasons. But if everything's right in the area, they like the older clear cuts, or just you have to know big woods to kind of explain it, but it doesn't have to be a clear cut area. We have this cover, it's called beech brush. I don't know if you've ever heard of that, but beech brush is really good because it holds its leaves kind of like an oak tree. They won't drop their leaves sometimes even at all till basically new ones start. So it's basically dependent on what's in the area too. Some areas there is no shift because the cover just stays the same. But in a lot of areas, like I brought up before, the leaf drop is kind of like one of the main reasons for that bedding shift.
Got it. Speaking of, I guess shifting a little bit, you find a lot of shed antlers too, and I think as it being February right now, people want to find shed antlers as much as you do. And so, what's a key takeaway, or what's your shed hunting process look like? Because Hunter Uplinger, PA, he's like a shed maniac. He covers a ton of ground. But I guess what's some advice for people that want to find more shed antlers?
Sure. Your best place to find sheds, if you have it, is if you have a food source like acorns. The reason why is they'll drop. Bedding areas are awesome places, but I have noticed, because it's hard to tell when a buck's going to drop his antlers. If you're in those bedding areas looking, if he hasn't dropped or there's multiple bucks bedding in there, you're just going to bump him right out. Yep. So they'll be somewhere else. But I love to look. Like this year we had a good acorn crop in places, and I've already found maybe 4 or 5 in acorns already, and it's early. So food sources are going to be your best place if you got them, just for the fact too that the deer aren't there in the daytime. So you're not harming anything. You can go in there every day really and look. And one thing that I've done too this year just purposely with cameras is in food sources is I've put some cameras up, and I'm like going in there like almost every other day just to see if anything dropped. And I found a couple sheds that way just because, oh geez, that deer dropped, and dropped them right near there. So food sources are your best and safest bet. I like bedding areas, but it's a gamble. If I was going to do bedding areas, I probably wouldn't go in there till literally, to play it safe, probably like April. Then 99% of deer have dropped by then. And then if it's a bad winter, south-facing slopes with evergreen cover, they'll go in there. But this year, we haven't really had a bad winter, so really what's out there right now is kind of similar to what the deer were doing even early mid-November. So which is really good for scouting. Not to jump on another topic, but if you're out in the woods, it's been a mild winter and the deer aren't kind of in a real wintering area, what you're seeing now is good intel for what you're going to find next November.
That's a good point.
Yep.
Very good point. How many sheds do you find roughly a year? I'm sure it's different every year, but
usually, honestly, only probably around 20. This year, I think I'm going to find more, just for the fact that I think I'm just going to do more shed hunting. The reason why I don't sometimes get too crazy into shed hunting is just for the fact that I'm a big guy as far as like I'm really into the postseason scouting stuff. I think it's the most important, best time of year to scout. So as much as I want to shed hunt, like I know there's new areas I need to be finding, and I need to be learning more about this deer or that area. So in the past, even though I'll sometimes just stumble onto an antler doing that, I've probably put off a lot of shed hunting just because I'm trying to learn more about certain areas, certain deer. But I don't know, this year the urge to shed hunt is getting really, really bad. So hopefully it doesn't affect me next year. But I'm really looking forward to this year in shed hunting, that's for sure.
When you're doing your, I guess, postseason scouting, are you looking for like those test camera locations when you're? Because I assume most of the postseason stuff you're doing is either to confirm, past historical spots, or you're, like you mentioned, looking for those new spots that could be something for the following year. So, I guess when you're going in there, one is, I guess, what kind of sign are you looking for, and what time of year or how are you relating that sign to a specific time of the year, and then are you putting cameras in those locations?
Oh, yeah. A lot of the test locations are found this time of year, just because I probably do, except for the rut, but I probably 90-some% of my hunting is I wouldn't call it, I'm not the kind of guy that anymore likes to hunt right on top of beds. And I brought that up in one of my Facebook posts and I was new to it. There's a lot of guys really getting right on top of beds, but in the big woods, in these mountains, the problem is that I noticed, actually, it happened 3 different times. I was within 100 yards of a bed, and you get too many wind shifts in the mountains. And I actually saw one of the bucks get up and run as soon as the wind shifted once. And then I heard 2 others take off. So, but I'm almost always in bedding areas, but I like to find the beds, but I like to back off. 200-400 yards, and those are the areas I'm looking for right now, because I can go in there and I know that I'm not hurting anything. If I do bump him now, he's had many months to forget about me. So yeah, that's what I'm looking for. I'm looking for sign, and you might, I don't know if I always want to say bedding area, but there's another area beyond the bedding area that a buck will move in the daylight. Maybe it's a bedding area, but he doesn't really bed there. And that's kind of the area that I'm looking for. And yeah, I'm looking for signs, scrapes. I love to find real hot active scrapes, in those areas. Put a camera there. And if I don't know what's in the area and it's just kind of a gamble, that's just the perfect spot for what I call a test camera. Go in there next October, set it up, and probably half the time, and I usually find a good spot that way.
When you're, when you're postseason scouting some of the new bedding locations, and you're finding those bedding locations, is that typical like hill country bedding, upper 1/3, leeward side, is it everywhere? No,
always up high. Yeah. I've actually, except for in the winter, the bucks will go down low in bed just because get out of the wind and less snow and different reasons like that. But I 90-some% once again is always. This year I even made notes, and I was almost always at least 1,500 feet in elevation. And I had some, because I talked about that on Facebook. I had some guys comment and didn't agree with me, but I think it depends on the mountains you have, and I'm not saying 1,500 feet, in any area. It just depends on the area, but the mountains we have are all relatively the same. So it seemed like 1,500 feet and higher was the prime bedding, elevation.
That's interesting. I guess as well too. So when you're trying to find those areas 200 or 300 yards off of the bedding area, what does that look like to you, or when does your buck senses go off of?
Sure.
That's what this looks like.
And sometimes I don't even find any beds, but what I'm noticing is the bucks almost always are right near a drop on the ridge. So I try to stay off the edges of the ridge, and maybe more on the center, or back up on a flat, but still in the cover. Mm-hmm. A lot of hunters, they like to get on the outside edge of the cover, but I've had a lot more luck getting right in, because I really think there's some deer, till it gets dark, they don't want to come out at all.
Yeah.
So if you can find little holes or trails within there and set up right inside the cover, that's where I like to go. But I try to stay off the rims, just because anywhere along the edges of the ridge or right near a bench, that's where they're bedding. So, but I also think that you could really hit a huge home run by hunting right on top of a bed too. Just for the wind doesn't shift, everything goes right, especially early season. Mm-hmm. I think could be a great way, but if it doesn't work out for you, those 1 or 2 times, and you do bump them, you might be done for the whole season. So with that deer, so that's why I just think that some, I see it on Facebook, podcasts, and all that. Everyone's really getting into this bedding game, and I think in the mountains, guys do have to have a different strategy than what, definitely in the mountains, it can be calling for like a north wind, and I promise you, don't be banking on that north wind in that certain location, because it's going to do different things.
Yeah, I mean, I think anybody familiar with hill country absolutely agrees with that, because it took me a couple of years coming from ag flat ground to figure out not just the thermals and the wind, but like when you look at the weather forecast, the way the wind hits whatever, a clear cut, a standing timber, a point on a ridge, like it's never going to be what they're calling for. Like you need to do a little bit of wind mapping, or what we call wind mapping, in those stand spots to figure out, okay, they're calling for west wind, but it's really southeast or whatever, like northwest, whatever it's going to be. But you don't know that till you go into those spots and wind map it, basically.
Yeah, and sometimes it is consistent, though. Like the wind will almost do somewhat the same thing in a certain area. Maybe it's just the way the hills are rolling together.
100%.
Keep an eye on that. But I just think in the mountains, the more I've, scouted, hunted, I still think it's better to just back off, because I know those bucks are still getting up half hour before it gets dark, moving around. I'd rather just play it safe, find a hot scrape inside that, whether you're going to call it bedding area or maybe like a safe zone. I just think, you're better off hunting those locations rather than, gambling and getting right on top of them. And, like I said before, once you bump them once, you might not see that deer again.
When you're going into hunting those edge locations, like those staging areas, whatever you want to, safe zones, whatever you want to call them, are you trying to go in there on specific weather days, like waiting for those cold fronts, or is it just, okay, that I know this deer's in the area, I think this is where he's bedding, I'm going to go in there because I know he's going to be up a half hour before dark anyways?
Sure. Last year I got a little anxious, and I probably overhunted on some days that I shouldn't have. It just wasn't being productive. But as I look in the past, what's worked for me is definitely cold fronts. I mean, I know any big weather change can be a factor, but there's nothing like a extreme cold front. And I'm telling you, if you're someone that can hunt basically whenever they want, or you're blessed with the time, or you're retired, I would say just stay at home or go do some scouting or work around the house, whatever. Wait for those perfect weather days, because I would almost guarantee that the buck you're hunting on those days is going to be getting up, moving around more than what he usually is. So I think even next year, I've been thinking about, how I'm going to hunt in that. I'm going to do exactly what I'm saying. Hopefully we get a bunch of good October cold fronts, and then I'm going to be out there, because, that's the thing. If I know we're all anxious, and, hunting season, even though maybe my wife thinks it's year round, but to me it feels like it's only a week or two, and it goes by so fast. But I'd rather recommend, if it's not premier weather conditions, just go out and scout or do something else, and wait for the prime weather, because it's just one of those things. Why do you want to put more time, scent, and bump more deer in certain areas when they're probably not going to be getting up and moving around you anyways?
Mm-hmm. Yep. Just trying to maximize the odds when you have those things stacked in your favor.
Definitely.
I guess before we wrap up this section, I guess the first part of the series is there any, I guess, major key takeaways that you would regret if you didn't say for postseason scouting that we haven't covered?
Yeah, maybe we've talked about it, but I just want to urge people to scout postseason. I don't think there's enough people doing it, and I don't think there's people that really realize how good and how important it is. For one, obviously but you can basically do whatever you want this time of year, and it's not going to affect next year at all. So why go in the woods, September, October, even November, and try to figure it all out then, when you've got literally months right now of the signs all laid out for you.
Yep.
You can even cut your lanes now, or prepare sites. Do it all now, and then next year, even during the season, you can hunt more then, just because you don't have to do all that work. It's funny. It's day hunting season ends, because I'm hunting public land. I'm lucky if I ever see 10 people from late December till May in the woods at all. It's like, it's also nice too. It's like, wow, I got these all for myself. But I just would encourage people to make sure you keep the fire going inside of you year round, because if you really want to be successful at this, you have to do it now rather than later. I think that's the biggest thing.
Yeah, everything you learned in postseason scouting is one more data point too.
Exactly.
For the fall. So there's a lot of things you can correlate.
Yep.
Well, cool. We appreciate it, and I guess if you want to listen to Steve Sherk again, you have to wait till probably early November. So I apologize. Reach out to Steve in the meantime if you have any questions, I'm sure. But how can people track you down?
Facebook, Instagram. I also have a website, just shirksguideservice.com. So I'm not a big tech guy, so I apologize if I've had people email me at times on my guide service, and I do have trouble running the website, so I just want to give people a little heads up. So I would definitely focus more on Facebook and Instagram. If you're not a social media guy, just bear with me with the website stuff for maybe another year, then I'll get it figured out.
Gotcha. No, I do enjoy a lot of your long form posts on Facebook. There's a lot of good stuff on there, so be sure to take Steve up on that.
Thank you so much.